Major Spencer, greetings and great to see you in First Western.
Thank you.
I would like to start with your last visit to Ukraine. Why did you visit our country and what did you do in Ukraine?
Sure. So on my last visit, which was, I think, what was that, in April of 2023, I was continuing my research on the Battle of Kiev. I think that's the most important battle of the modern era. So I've done multiple trips researching, interviewing commanders. I interviewed the Mayor Klitschko this time, trying to understand all that happened during that battle. And basically when Russia was defeated for the Battle of Ukraine, they'll never get another shot. So I was doing interviews in and around Kiev, trying to further understand the Battle of Kiev so that I've written many articles, and I actually presented at the Kiev Independent while I was there about the battle, trying to tell the story, because I think right now we have an issue with there's so many stories that impact the world coming out of Ukraine, the bravery, the unsurmountable odds, but proving all the things in war about the will to fight and fighting for a just cause actually triumphs eventually. There's not so much the numbers. There's so many of these stories, but as a researcher, as a teacher of strategy and war, it's so important for me to visit. And actually, I'll be back actually just next month, continuing my research on the war.
I would like also to invite you to visit our city and to have in-person interview in Lviv. But what did impress you the most in the Battle of Kiev, and what did you learn for yourself from this battle for Kiev?
Well, there's been so much I've learned and so many surprises really about the tenacity of the Ukrainian people. And this is really, I think, where everybody got it wrong and really could not know that Ukraine was free. Ukraine did not want to be under Russia's thumb anymore, but it was really all the people uprising. This is what I say even today. Yes, the Ukrainian military has grown, 10 times in its strength and power, but the Russian military isn't fighting the Ukrainian military. It's fighting the Ukrainian people. And any military is going to lose at that. But in the Battle of Kiev, there's so many stories of regular citizens joining the fight and having critical moments in the battle, whether it was the Battle of Hostomel, the Battle of in Bucha, in Brovary. They're just stories of military and civilians banding together to create these, this massive porcupine, this massive unbreakable strength that was the Ukrainian people. And we see that happening over and over again. I've just had a very specific, I study urban warfare too, and how the city itself, the city of Kiev, an ancient city that predates Russia, that predates any of the ideals, and how important cities are in war. And we see this continuing in Bakhmut and all the battles that we're seeing. And that's my specialty, is urban combat. And to be frank, I actually played a role, and I wrote a small manual for Ukraine at the beginning of the war on how to turn your cities into these defendable fortresses. And we see that happening over and over again. And really the Battle of Kiev is very important to a lot of countries around the world. You have to withstand the opening shock of the war and then continue fighting. And this is what we've seen go on throughout the battle.
Did you also do research on liberation of Kherson region and liberation of Kharkiv regions of Ukraine?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm pretty busy, but absolutely. Each one of those, as I teach a course in California, which is the only course in the world for military planners, is that each city is different, each battle is different, and like the liberation of Kherson, the liberation and the Kharkiv offensive show how the different urban areas are approached, whether defending or attacking. So many lessons that I'm learning from there, and I'm just trying to collect them. I actually have some research really in the next week about the Battle of Mariupol, which is will become a legend for the Ukrainian people and for the world. And there's actually very few battles around the world that are that pivotal and that iconic. And so I'm doing a lot of research on the Battle of Mariupol right now with a lot of the defenders and trying to record its history as the war continues, while Ukraine is rightfully busy fighting the aggressor, the invader, and liberating all the trapped, occupied areas. But there's also this very big concern of recording the history as much as possible and getting it and informing the greater world about what has gone on in Ukraine. Is, the populations do see a little glimpse of the war, but they don't really know the stories that are so many coming out of Ukraine right now. And I'm playing a small role in that.
President Zelensky says that some counteroffensive operations have already begun. Also, Ukrainians have liberated some territories. How could you assess this stage of this phase of the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation?
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see President Zelensky basically officially say it had been started. I mean, if you're a military analyst, you could tell that the operation had started even before that with the longer range strikes, armed reconnaissance, things like that. But the offensive is clearly in the last 2-3 weeks, and so many liberated villages confirmed by geolocations. I mean, what the Ukrainians have done just in 2 weeks is more than Russia was able to do in a year. Whether you consider Bakhmut ever being taken, but Russia's winter offensive showed no gain in territorial aspects, although it's all illegally occupied. I mean, there is this, which was a warning by you're not trying to overemphasize the speed of the Ukrainian counteroffensive, because unlike Russia, Ukraine will not sacrifice tens of thousands like they did in Bakhmut to take what they had already destroyed, 40, 50,000 dead Russians to take Bakhmut. Ukraine doesn't fight like that, and they won't. They value every soldier, men and women. So they're going to approach the counteroffensive very smartly, and that's what we've been seeing up the last 2 weeks. But there's actually been, multiple gains, multiple villages liberated. It's a process, and that Ukraine is showing that it's going to fight smartly, but they're on the advance, they're on the attack daily. I would assess it as having success already, moving slowly but surely forward. And we haven't seen really the majority of the brigades assigned for the counteroffensive, right? These 12 plus assault brigades and the others that have been allocated, some armed with Western weapons, some not, because Ukraine didn't receive enough Western weapons. But we haven't even seen what we call the main effort, the big decisive operation of wherever the value of success for Ukraine is. That's still to come.
Former US General Ben Hodges says that main attack of Ukrainian in the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation has not yet begun. Do you support such point?
Absolutely. And General Hodges is one of the best experts that's out there, former U.S. Europe commander, been to Ukraine multiple times. That's one of the main people that I listen to 100%. The main attack has not happened. And even you see it continuing to happen even today with strikes behind Russian lines, with ammunition depots, key bridges, things like that, that strike is coming, but it's going to come when the Ukrainians view the risk to their soldiers and view the success at operating that main attack will happen.
In your opinion, when and how could the main attack of the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation begin?
So, nobody can say that. Only the Ukrainian, general staff, General Zaporizhzhia, and all the great leaders of Ukraine that are really going down in the history books will be able to say it'll happen when Ukrainian forces are ready, or what we call the conditions are set. Whether that's a opening being identified in the Russian lines, if that's a moment when everything is set in place. This, again, the leadership is assessing it minute by minute. It'll happen when it's ready and not a second before then.
President Zelensky says that lots of occupied territories are mined by Russian side and it is challenge for our force. How it is possible to overcome this challenge?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few ways. The challenges, there are certain pieces of equipment to clear minefields, forces which are trained in that aspect of, and to be honest, the Ukrainians have not been given all the equipment, those heavy mechanized mine clearing pieces of equipment, but it does take slow operations down. Absolutely, Russia has really broken many laws of war on mining in occupied or basically observed mines, and that's causing a big problem and will continue to actually cause a problem for years, just like we've seen with the Kherson Dam, basically unseating the mines that Russia doesn't even know where they put. It's going to be years and years of demining, but in this counteroffensive, absolutely, they have to get through mined obstacles, and that takes special units, special equipment, and it takes time to do it correctly.
You mentioned about Kherson Dam attack. How could Kherson Dam destruction influence Ukrainian capabilities to conduct counteroffensive operations in the south of Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, clearly it takes resources, because this is the crime of the biggest ecological crime since really Chernobyl, the biggest disaster. It causes Ukraine to put resources. Those are Ukrainian military forces helping to rescue refugees and bring water and all of that because it's capacity. Will it slow down the offensive? I don't think so. It actually opens up even other portions that weren't open before, as we've seen some operations in the Kherson region. But the fact that Russia continues to bomb the rescue operations daily, mortars, artillery, snipers, it's almost like, when is enough enough, that it should stop and allow all those thousands and thousands of people that need help right now to happen. And that there's a way to do that, and just Putin refuses to do it, and the Russian forces are continuing to break war crimes every day. I don't think it has a major impact on the counteroffensive. As we see, the counteroffensive has pushed forward after the explosion of the dam, which was done by Russia.
In your opinion, what was the rationale for Russian troops to blow up Kherson Dam from a military point of view?
From a military point of view, it did take away that possibility. And nobody even knows that that was a plan of Ukraine's to cross at those points along the river. It caused a major disaster for international news to focus on that rather than the Russian losses. It is a very minuscule but a tactical advantage that it causes attention to be there. It causes Ukrainian military forces to have to be used there. And there were some forces within the Russian military in that region that could be relocated, although they actually flooded out their own forces in some areas, but relocated in places like Zaporizhzhia, where they needed to reinforce and to slow down possible advances there. So there's some small tactical advantage, but this is why it's a war crime. Even there have been other dams in history, but militaries are required by the law of war to assess the damage their actions will cause on the civilian population, on the earth. And that's why this is not proportional. It wasn't a military necessity to blow that dam. It was really a war crime.
You mentioned about Chernobyl tragedy, but unfortunately we could face one more tragedy. President Zelensky says that Russia prepares to conduct a major terrorist attack on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. How could it also affect situation on the ground?
I mean, it would be, global catastrophe. And I saw President Zelensky's comments, and it's a huge concern. And the fact that we've had international inspectors there validating that Russian military are using it as a safe zone, there should be a more international outcry to create basically a military exclusion zone around Zaporizhzhia power plant, second biggest in Europe. If something was to happen, it would be worse than Chernobyl. The impact on the world would be huge. And it's just, frustrating that Russia won't allow or get out of the power plant to possibly cause that global of a nuclear catastrophe. It is significant. And I don't know if enough people are listening, and especially multinational organizations. It's a major concern. I wouldn't put it past the Russians to be purposely causing a disaster there, again, to bring attention away from their battlefield losses. This is what Russia does. This is Russia's playbook. And that's unthinkable that to use the nuclear power plant to do this, but it's losing ground. This is why it bombs Ukrainian cities, to include Lviv, every day, is that its military can't create success on the battlefield, so it needs to create attention away from that. And unfortunately, that would be another one. I'm praying that that's not going to happen.
From military point of view, does such attack make any sense for Russian side?
No, absolutely not. I mean, most I'm not a nuclear expert, but most experts have said that the nuclear fallout, the contamination would actually drift towards Russian forces and towards Russia. It makes no sense to do it, but Russia has done a lot of things that make no sense. I mean, I put this very low on the probability matrix, but it is a major concern that has to be dealt with. But yeah, it would make zero sense for them to do that.
What could do the West to prevent happening such catastrophe in the future? Maybe imposing a no-fly zone over critical infrastructure of Ukraine, or deploying some troops, or doing something else?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few options, and there are historical precedents on many options to create some type of safe area around that, such a critical piece of ground. I mean, yes, it's a piece of power infrastructure, but because of its nuclear, I mean, the potential for catastrophe is so high. Absolutely, there could be an international call to create a safe zone. We have international inspectors there right now. It could be turned over to a third-party organization, any country, and it doesn't need to be even a NATO country, saying, look, go in and put forces there, create a safe area. Neither side can have military effects within this safe zone for the duration of the war, for whatever. Absolutely, there's a way to do it, and Putin refuses to allow even discussions about doing that.
US President Joe Biden says that possible usage of nuclear weapons by Russia is real. Do you believe in such scenario?
I mean, you can't discount it. You can never say never. I believe it's, again, low. The use of a tactical nuclear weapon by Putin would trigger, outside organizations to get involved. It could not go unanswered, and that could be a conventional response against Russian forces. Not saying it would trigger World War III, not saying it would trigger, global nuclear war, but Putin uses a weapon of mass destruction in Ukraine. It would trigger a response by Western nations. It could not, and there are multiple plans, I'm sure, for what that response would look like. But it is a real concern because of Putin's failures. And if our president say it's a valid, considerable concern, then it is. Putin likes to rattle his nuclear saber. Nobody wins in a nuclear war, but a tactical nuclear weapon is a very big concern for all nations of the world. If Putin crosses that line, it is a line that would spark an immediate, lethal, conventional response, because it has to.
From a military point of view, how could such conventional response from Western countries look like? And in your opinion, how should such response look like?
Yeah, I don't have the really awareness of what the exact conventional response is. And I think even if you ask General Ben Hodges, he wouldn't say what the exact response might look like, because it depends on what it was, where it was, the impact on, and then the response. There's a matrix and there are options. on Russian forces in Ukraine, on Russian forces near Ukraine, Russian military forces. I think it would be a military response against military capacity of the Russian forces. But I can't speculate on what that response will look like, nor do I really have the awareness on what it might be.
Could it also involve deployment of NATO troops in Ukraine, or only retaliation with the missile strikes?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I never say never. But there is this international order. There's kind of this rule book in which Putin knows, and this is one of the reasons why I don't think it is high at all on his list of options to do, because if this, then that, right? So if you use a weapon of mass destruction, then the West can do more than just arm Ukraine. Does that mean NATO would put boots on the ground in some form or fashion? I have no idea. I think it's more likely of a military strike against Russian military forces in Ukraine or near Ukraine than the actual placing NATO forces into Ukraine. But you never know. It all depends on what's used, how it's used.
We hope it will never happen in the future, and thank you, Major Spencer, for your time and for participation in our interview, and glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.